In the 1910s, there was this team that was just so utterly dominant, they weren't even named after their city or, their mascot.
Right.
They were actually named after cold, hard cash.
Which is just wild.
It really is. I mean, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, you are looking at a group of 4 men who were so incredibly valuable, so completely light years ahead of their competition, that the press literally dubbed them the $100,000 Infield.
It's just a phenomenal piece of history.
Mm.
And it's not just some obscure sports footnote,
Yeah, definitely not.
It is a literal masterclass in market economics, just completely colliding with athletic perfection. It says so much about not just the game they were playing, but the rapid industrialization of the world they were living in at the time.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've got a massive stack of notes, plus a highly detailed Wikipedia breakdown of the early 1910s Philadelphia athletics.
Lots of ground to cover.
For sure. We're tracking the rise, the just mind-boggling individual stats of these 4 guys, the way they literally reinvented defensive geometry on the field, and, well, the brutal financial reality that ultimately blew the whole thing up right at their absolute peak.
Yeah, it's a dramatic arc.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand why baseball historian Bill James calls them the greatest infield of all time, you first have to look at how they were actually built. And, it didn't happen overnight.
Oh, far from it. Manager Connie Mack essentially engineered this group piece by piece.
Right.
You don't just, buy a championship roster of this magnitude, right? You cultivate it over a span of several years. He was looking for a very specific type of player, which completely went against the grain of how baseball was operating at the turn of the century.
Which brings up their timeline. And this is where I see a massive parallel to, a modern tech startup.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about Connie Mack as a visionary founder in the early 1900s, right? Baseball back then was largely a really gritty working class game.
Very much so.
But Mack, he is actively recruiting highly educated, elite talent from top-tier universities.
Right.
The first piece of the puzzle is Eddie Collins. He debuts way back on September 17th, 1906, coming straight out of Columbia University.
Yeah, bringing an actual Ivy League intellect to the middle of the diamond.
Exactly. Then, 2 years later, in 1908, Mack pulls Jack Barry out of the College of the Holy Cross.
Another highly educated guy.
Right. And that exact same year, he brings in Frank Baker. And then finally, to just complete this whole laboratory experiment, he adds this absolute wild card Stuffy McInnis.
Right, the teenager.
Yeah, an 18-year-old teenage prodigy who joins the team in 1909 as a backup. So Mack is essentially mixing elite collegiate intellect with raw, unfiltered teenage talent to just disrupt the entire American League.
What's fascinating here is the sheer intentionality of that strategy.
Right.
I mean, Mack had these incredible young assets, but he forced them to marinate. He didn't rush the process at all.
Which is so rare today.
Exactly. Like McInnis, for example, spent his first couple of years strictly on the bench, backing up Barry at shortstop.
Wow. 2 years just waiting.
Yep. Mack was slowly phasing out older veterans, just waiting for the exact right moment. And that moment finally hit in 1911, when Mack made the decisive move to insert McInnis as the regular first baseman.
Replacing Harry Davis, right?
Right, who was a very popular veteran. But Mack knew it was time. The circuit was finally closed.
So the circuit is closed, the machine is turned on, and the output is just terrifying for the rest of the league.
Absolutely terrifying.
We really need to look at the mechanics of this ecosystem, because you have 4 highly distinct skill sets interlocking flawlessly.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the anchor, Eddie Collins at second base. So between 1910 and 1914, he plays 738 games and hits .344.
We really have to pause on that number to appreciate the context.
Yeah, please, because it sounds high, but...
A .344 batting average over a 5-year span is staggering in any era. But you have to remember, this is the dead ball era. The baseball itself was essentially a soft, scuffed-up lump of yarn. Pitchers were actively spitting on it, rubbing it with dirt.
Throws, but yeah.
It was practically invisible by the late innings, and it just didn't travel. Runs were at an absolute premium.
So hitting .344 in that environment...
It means Collins was diagnosing pitches and placing the ball with surgical precision. It's unbelievable.
And he was a menace on the base paths, too. He racked up 922 hits in that 5-year span.
Wow.
He led the American League in stolen bases in 1910, runs in 1912, 1913, and 1914, singles in 1913, and times on base in 1914.
It's relentless.
Truly. He finished in the top 10 in MVP voting every single year from 1911 through 1914, and actually took home the actual MVP award in 1914.
He's the ultimate table setter.
Exactly, and hitting right behind him, you have the heavy artillery Frank Baker at third base.
The premier power hitter of the dead ball era. Baker batted .324 in that same 5-year window, but his true differentiator was just raw power. He led the American League in home runs every single year from 1911 through 1914. And he led the league in RBIs in 1912 and 1913.
Which earns him literally the most literal nickname in sports history, Frank Home Run Baker.
Right, Home Run Baker.
Because he hits 2 home runs in the 1911 World Series to become the hero, and the press just calls him Home Run forever.
Which is so funny.
It perfectly encapsulates how the game was played back then, right?
Yeah.
Like, hitting 2 homers in a whole series was so mind-blowing, they just named you after the concept itself.
It was unheard of.
So you've got Collins creating chaos on the bases, Baker driving them in, and over at first base, Stuffy McInnis is hitting an incredible .321.
Also a huge average.
But defensively, the source material notes McInnis was a geometric nightmare for hitters because of his reach.
That's the perfect way to describe it. He wasn't just catching throws, you know?
Right.
His flexibility allowed the other infielders to play deeper. If you know your first baseman can stretch out like a gymnast to dig a ball out of the dirt, you can position yourself an extra step or 2 backward.
Okay.
And that expands your defensive range exponentially.
Which leads me to a major question I had reading through these stats. I really need to push back on the 4th guy in this group, Jack Barry.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've established Collins hitting .344, Baker at .324, McInnis at .321. They are offensive tight ends. But then you have Jack Barry, the shortstop. He's hitting .260.
Right.
Yet the source material explicitly notes that Barry still finished in the top 20 in MVP voting every single year from 1911 to 1914, even finishing 9th in 1913.
Yes, he did.
How does a guy hitting .260 in a lineup of .320 plus hitters command that kind of MVP respect? Was defensive synergy really valued that highly over batting averages back then?
It absolutely was, because of how Barry played the position. The value wasn't in his bat. It was in his processing speed and his arm.
Okay.
Barry was a defensive innovator. We mentioned earlier that Mock drafted these guys from Columbia and Holland Cross, right?
The Ivy League intellect.
Exactly. That intellect translated directly to the dirt. Barry and Collins actually invented defensive plays together.
Like what?
Like a highly specific trap to kill the double steal.
The double steal defense? Yes. Let's actually walk through the mechanics of that because it's brilliant.
It really is.
Normally, if the offense has runners on first and third, and the guy on first breaks for second, it puts the defense in a terrible bind.
Because you have to make a choice.
Right. If the catcher throws to second base to get the out, the guy on third instantly sprints home to score.
Exactly. It forces the defense to choose between giving up a base or giving up a run.
Which is a lose-lose.
It is. So what Barry and Collins designed was a calibrated funnel to weaponize the offense's aggression.
Okay, how did that work?
They choreographed a play where the second baseman Collins would sprint toward the bag to look like he was taking the throw.
Drawing the runner off third base?
Precisely. But Barry, the shortstop, would deliberately cut across the throwing lane, intercept the catcher's thrower before it ever reached second base, and instantly fire it back home to gun down the lead runner.
It's a total bait and switch.
Complete.
They created an illusion. That is exactly why Barry was getting MVP votes. You combine his massive range and his baseball IQ with McInnis's exceptional reach at first base, and you have this impenetrable defensive trap.
Exactly. Barry didn't need to hit .340 because his defensive innovations were suffocating the other team's run production.
Right.
He was the structural integrity of the entire operation.
And the ultimate proof of that system is the hardware they collected. I mean, when you zoom out and look at the collective success of this ecosystem, it is just staggering.
The numbers speak for themselves.
Between 1910 and 1914, the Philadelphia Athletics won 4 American League pennants: 1910, 1911, 1913, and 1914.
Dominant.
And they won 3 World Series titles in 1910, 1911, and 1913.
Complete and utter domination.
Yeah. Bill James, the legendary baseball historian, he actually ranks the 1914 edition of this group as the #1 greatest infield of all time.
The best ever.
And he ranks the 1912 and 1913 editions in the top 5. Like, they weren't just the best in their era, they are statistically considered the absolute pinnacle of baseball history.
They were a perfectly calibrated machine.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
We have to talk about the money,
Yes.
the name.
Right. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, that famous $100,000 Infield nickname reflected the purported combined market value of these four guys. 100 grand.
Which was a massive sum.
Huge. But when you adjust that for inflation to 2024 dollars, it equates to about $2.44 million.
Wow.
Think about the irony there for a modern sports fan. Today, $2.44 million is what a team might pay, like a middle-inning relief pitcher, or a backup utility guy to sit on the bench.
Barely enough for backup these days.
Right. But back in the early 1910s, that was the awe-inspiring astronomical valuation for the four best players on the planet combined.
The contrast is striking, for sure. But, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that nickname was entirely double-edged.
How so? Yes, it was a testament to their unparalleled skill, but it was also a massive glowing price tag. When you define a group of men by their monetary value in the press and the public eye, economics will inevitably override athletics.
Oh, that makes sense.
The public was marveling at this $100,000 valuation, but the players themselves were listening too.
They weren't dumb.
Exactly. Remember, Ivy League intellects.
Yeah.
They realized they were generating massive revenue for the franchise, but they weren't seeing it reflected in their paychecks.
Which leads us directly into the tragedy of this story.
A fall.
The sudden, brutal collapse of the whole thing, because the $100,000 Infield wasn't beaten by a better team, and they didn't just age out of their prime, they were destroyed by the harsh realities of sports economics.
Yeah.
And the breaking point really kicks off with them shockingly losing the 1914 World Series. It was a grueling sweep by the Boston Braves, which completely shattered their aura of invincibility.
That loss shook the foundation, certainly.
Yeah.
But the real earthquake was happening in the front offices, with the emergence of the Federal League. This was a newly formed third major league that decided the fastest way to compete with the established American and national leagues was to just outbid them for top-tier talent.
And suddenly, Connie Mack's perfectly balanced ecosystem is under siege. You have this rival Federal League offering enormous, unprecedented contracts.
Money they had never seen before.
For the first time in baseball history, these players have massive leverage. If Mack won't pay them what the newly disrupted market dictates, they can simply threaten to jump ship.
And Mack found himself in an impossible position financially.
Because he couldn't match it.
Right. In the 1910s, baseball owners didn't have multi-billion-dollar television broadcasting deals or massive corporate sponsorships to fall back on.
It was all ticket sales.
Almost entirely tied to gate receipts, daily ticket sales. Mack couldn't simply absorb a massive spike in his payroll to match these Federal League offers because his stadium only held a finite number of people.
He could only charge so much for a ticket.
Exactly. He was completely financially squeezed.
So rather than bleed money trying to keep them, Mack initiates one of the most infamous fire sales in sports history.
It was brutal.
And the speed of it is just dizzying. Right after that 1914 World Series loss, Mack sells Eddie Collins, the reigning league MVP, mind you, to the Chicago White Sox.
Just gone.
Then, right in the middle of the 1915 season, he sells his defensive maestro, Jack Barry, to the Boston Red Sox.
Which brings us to Frank Baker, whose response to this situation is perhaps the most defining moment of player agency in this entire saga.
Oh, I love this part.
Baker didn't get sold off immediately. Instead, he demanded a salary increase that Connie Mack flatly refused to pay.
And Baker doesn't just complain to the press. He literally packs up and goes home.
Yeah, he does.
He holds out for the entire 1915 season. Think about what that meant if you were a player back then. You are the premier power hitter of your generation, at the absolute physical peak of your career, and you voluntarily sit out a full year.
He just stayed at his farm in Maryland.
Just farming. The fans were completely stunned.
It's a staggering display of leverage and sheer stubbornness. Baker inherently understood his worth. He knew the Athletics needed his bat far more than he needed Connie Mack's lowball contract offer.
Oh.
This wasn't just a minor contract dispute. It was a standoff that threatened the competitive integrity of the entire American League. It got so bad, and the standoff lasted so long, that Ban Johnson, the powerful president of the American League, personally had to step in and mediate the situation.
It literally takes the president of the league to end the standoff.
Yep.
Johnson finally brokers a deal in 1916, and Baker is sold to the New York Yankees. which leaves Stuffy McInnis as the lone survivor of the original four in Philadelphia.
The last man standing.
He sticks around until 1918 before he's eventually traded to the Red Sox, too. The dynasty is officially dismantled, piece by piece.
This raises an important question regarding how we view sports history as fans.
Okay, what's that?
We love to romanticize team loyalty. Fans want to believe that athletes play purely for the love of the city or the logo on the front of the jersey.
Right, the romance of the game.
But the saga of the $100,000 infield teaches us that underneath the romance, these are labor disputes.
Yeah.
The nickname they were given was meant to marvel at how expensive they were.
Yeah.
But it actually taught the players that they were being drastically undervalued by their owner. When the Federal League provided the competition necessary to expose that wage suppression, the players realized they didn't have to settle.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. They became acutely aware of the price tag hanging around their necks.
Exactly.
And what proves that this was purely about money and not about a decline in skill is what happened next. It's not like Connie Mack traded them because they were washed up.
Oh no, the talent was absolutely still there.
Eddie Collins goes on to win more championships with the White Sox and eventually returns to the Athletics years later to win even more rings in 1929 and 1930.
And into the Hall of Fame.
Right. In 1939, Frank Baker goes to the Yankees, wins pennants, and hits the Hall of Fame in 1955.
Incredible.
And Jack Barry and Stuffy McInnis. They actually reunite in Boston and win a World Series together with the Red Sox.
They were champions before, during, and after their time together.
Exactly. The Athletics management simply couldn't afford to keep all that championship DNA under one roof once the free market intervened.
It's true.
So what does this all mean? We look back at the early 1910s and we see a 5-year window that was essentially lightning in a bottle. For 5 fleeting years, 4 men, Collins, Baker, Barry, and McInnis, formed a perfectly interlocking baseball machine.
A literal machine.
They dominated the sport, they literally invented new geometric ways to play the infield, and they captured 3 World Series titles, only to be ripped apart by the exact same market forces that made them so famous to begin with.
It is a beautiful, brutal chapter of sports history. An era-defining collision of elite athletic talent and cold, hard economics that we may never see replicated in quite the same way.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Imagine an alternate history. Think about the New York Yankees of the 1920s with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, or the 1990s Chicago Bulls.
The great dynasties.
Dynasties that were largely allowed to stay together and build compounding historic legacies.
Right.
If the Federal League hadn't emerged in 1914 to artificially spike the market, if Connie Mack had somehow found the money to pay his guys what they were actually worth, how many more consecutive championships could Collins, Baker, Barry, and McInnis have won together?
It's a fascinating what if.
Would we look back at them today and consider them not just the greatest infield of all time, but the undisputed core of the greatest single team in the entire history of sports? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.